Response and the Relief Department of Airbnb. Our task is to lead and manage Airbnb's global response and the relief efforts to crisis and disaster impacting the community of Airbnb of guests and hosts. Previous position were manager for global crisis management in the Target Corporation, senior director for disaster services in the Points of Light, and executive director of Hands-On in New Orleans. So she's about to provide us with an overview of the Airbnb's Global Disaster Relief Assistance Program, how it works, some use cases, and how authorities can potentially use their services. My pleasure to give you the floor, and I have nice assistants to hold the line, so I can relax if I sleep down, so please wake me up at the end. You have the floor.
Great, thanks so much. You guys hear me? Okay, great. So as you mentioned, my name is Kelly Betts. I head our global disaster response and relief efforts. It was quite, I should say, it took me back for a second listening to the Paris attacks panel. Myself and a few of my colleagues actually were in Paris during the attacks. We had quite a large event, and it's actually our largest market for Airbnb. So really great to hear from the folks today, but it also kind of took us back for a minute. So just want to say thank you for that. So for those of you that are not aware of what Airbnb is, I've noticed that I've had to explain that a little bit, so I thought I might start there. We are a marketplace, an online marketplace for those that want to host, list, and identify unique places to stay around the world. So that might be an extra room in somebody's home, somebody like you and I, or it might be finding an entire castle to stay at, and it's literally that sort of vast array of opportunities of accommodations. And so some people ask, well, what does that have to do with disaster? Why are you in the preparedness space? What are you doing to respond, and how are you helping communities recover? Great question. And I would say the way that we look at it is we look at our platform and our hosts as our community. So we really don't look at ourselves as a business that's just trying to make money. We really look at ourselves as a community of hosts and guests. And that community of hosts and guests is made up of close to 60 million users and over 2 million hosts worldwide in 34,000 cities. So as you can imagine, when we think about our community, we really want to ensure that we're preparing our hosts as much as possible, because those people are the individuals in your communities, just like you and I. In addition, we want to make sure that when we're responding, that we're integrating our community, but also helping your communities recover. So as we talk through the program today, we really want to make sure that you see us as partners and ensure that we're able to work with you and support you in your efforts. So what I'm going to do is kind of walk through our program and outline our program components, and then I'm going to shift it back to Q&A, open it up to you guys and ask any questions you want, and then I'm going to invite two of my European colleagues to come up with me on stage to help answer any questions. So I'll go ahead and get started. So when we think about, and I apologize that a couple of the formatting things came over when we had to convert, and that's something I've had to get used to being a part of a tech company. We do everything on Google, which Google is amazing, and it's also converts differently when you go back over to Microsoft. So apologies for that. So our components include host, safety, and preparedness, and mostly disaster response and relief. And I would say what most people think about us for is really the relief side, and that's merely one component, and we're really proud of that, but we also have these other major areas of the program. So why are we here at EENA? So recently we actually developed a partnership with EENA to develop and implement 112 in those countries where 112 is recognized. So now, when hosts go into their listing, they can actually, can you not hear me? Okay. They can actually go in and fill in emergency numbers, but in those countries where 112 is prominent, it actually pre-populates. We're now doing this across the globe and implementing it and rolling this out. So 112 got implemented into these safety cards as of February of this year. This is one of the pages that you can go to on the Airbnb website for hosts, resources, and tools. And this is where we promote smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, fire extinguishers, etc. So we're always in the place of trying to provide the best resources for our hosts to make their listing as safe as possible. These are a few photos. Oftentimes we look at the partnerships that we can develop locally so that, again, our platform, what's different with us, with other technology companies, is that we're not just a platform. We actually have to manage or look at how we help manage that offline experience, right? So many of the things that we do in preparedness are actually training our hosts in person. So we partner with people like the Red Cross, or in France, Croix Rouge, in London, the London Fire Brigade. We try to ensure that we're partnering with the industry experts and providing that training to our hosts, both offline and online. So these are just a couple photos from those experiences. As we get into the disaster response and relief elements of it, we do think of this in a couple different ways. Since I'm sitting in a room of experts in this space, I won't go into as much detail as I typically do in general conferences that are not filled with emergency management experts. But when we talk about response, we're more looking at how are we responding as a company to the actual incident or disaster or crises. When we talk about relief, we're looking at how are we actually contributing to the support and recovery of the community. We also consider partnerships as a critical component, so we see partnerships as the underpinning of every area of our program. And so these are just a few examples of government relationships that we make. We want to make sure that governments understand that we are actually, well, some may think of us as a disruptive service provider. We actually look at ourselves as wanting to be a good partner with you. And so oftentimes, and every time actually I should say when we respond, I connect directly with our policy leads in the region, and we directly work with those government authorities to ensure that anything that we might activate will actually support the recovery or the response and not interrupt what you guys or what the emergency management agency is already doing on the ground. What we do most often, I would say, what we found to be really helpful with our guests and hosts, but particularly our guests, I think as one of the gentlemen mentioned in Paris, obviously there are numerous tourists, and all of our guests are typically tourists that are staying with our hosts. And so they're often foreign to the community or the city that they are visiting. So one of the things we want to make sure is when there is a catastrophic event that we actually drill down, figure out what's going on, who is the local authority with the best alerts and advisories, and actually lift and surface that information to our guests. These are a couple examples of when we did that in 2015 and a few examples that we've done it in 2016. This is an example of what that looks like. This is from Cyclone Marcia that occurred in Australia last year. And I pulled this up as an example of where we actually had quite a few different links. But as you can see, we are partnering with the local government in addition to NGOs, so highlighting or lifting up some of those preparedness resources in addition to what's going on in the response world, and highlighting the Twitter handle wherever Tom is. We do try to highlight that as well. One thing that is very important, as we talked about, we really speak to the Airbnb as a community, right? So our community of hosts is who we listen to first and foremost. And our relief program really came out of our community. One of our hosts during Hurricane Sandy that hit the east coast of the United States in 2012 reached out and said, there's no way for me to list my listing for $0. I want to be able to help those survivors that are displaced and the relief workers that are deploying in. So our engineers worked around the clock and created a tool, so we call it the disaster response tool, that allows our hosts to go in, open their home for $0, and allow survivors to stay in those homes for a specific period of time, or for relief workers to deploy and stay. How does it work? So when we decide to implement or activate the tool, again, one of our first calls is with our policy leads to most of you, many of you in the room, so the government authority that has authority over that jurisdiction to ensure that this might be a helpful tool. We then kind of decide, will this be helpful for survivors, or will this be more helpful for the NGOs or the responders that are coming in? And the reason we ask ourselves that is we now have the capability to whitelist, or basically on the back end determine who can actually book if that's ever a need. So if there's only going to be a small amount of listings available, then we may work with the government authority to ensure that those listings are going to go to the survivors that need it most during a specified period of time. So we're actually piloting this right now in Louisiana with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. In this situation in Nepal, we determined that it was extremely helpful after the earthquake to open our homes. And this actually became quite an interesting story, and where we identified that relief workers were really at our sort of core of where this tool can be most beneficial. So when we decide to activate, a note goes out automatically to all of our hosts once we hit that button. It's not quite that easy. There's actually an extensive process on the back end to do that. But once we do activate it, a message goes to our hosts asking them if they want to open their home. They click a button, they then get listed, and this is what the listings look like on the front end. That then gets posted to our disaster response page, and then those survivors that are displaced or relief workers that are deploying in can quickly build an account and book their listing for $0. So the host waives all their fees, Airbnb waives all of our fees, and it becomes quite helpful to the community. In this case in Nepal, a group called All Hands Volunteers actually went in and utilized all of the listings that were $0. What this allowed them to do is be within a mile of their work site every day. Additionally, the hosts became their local volunteers, and that organization is still on the ground. So while this was helpful just for those first few months, they were then able to build a local base camp for the rest of the volunteers and then the work they were going to continue to do in that community. So the most recent activation was in the Brussels attacks. We get often asked, when do you activate? How do you determine how you activate? Why did you activate for Brussels? You didn't activate for Istanbul. All valid questions. And a lot of times what we look at is, again, what is going to be most helpful? Is this actually helpful, or is this just a gesture? Sometimes a gesture is nice, but we want to ensure that what we're offering is going to be something that will be helpful to the community. In the case of Brussels, and I think as many of you know, the difference between Brussels and Paris, even though we did activate for Paris as well, but we activated after the shelter-in-place order was lifted, again, working in line with the government authorities to ensure that we put safety first, and ensure that we were opening the homes after that shelter-in-place order was lifted. But with Brussels, the reason why we believe it's more effective is because people were actually stranded. So while they may have had a reservation up until that Tuesday or Wednesday, obviously the airport did not open until that following Sunday, and even on Sunday, there was still only 3 flights that went out. And so when we look at travelers that might be stranded, both from an airport perspective and train perspective, it's very different than when it's an isolated incident and there aren't accommodations needed. So in that case, we may work with the government to provide travel credits for a small group of survivors that need accommodation. But obviously, in the case of some of the bombings or explosions, a large amount of housing or accommodation is not needed. These are just some of the photos of some of the volunteer organizations that we support. And this is more, while we were doing some enhancements on the product or on the tool, we actually decided to also create a travel credit program. So this is more on the philanthropic side when we decide to directly donate financial resources to organizations, so they are able to utilize and identify the accommodation that they need. This allows our hosts to continue to get paid, and then we're giving a philanthropic donation to these organizations. These are a couple of examples of where this has been successful. Where we currently have relief workers housed is in Lesbos, Kos, Serbia, Macedonia, Fiji, and Louisiana in the United States. And these are all from various different types of disasters. And obviously from a refugee standpoint, it's a humanitarian crisis versus a disaster, but we also believe that that's very important, and it's also allowing them to it's allowing relief workers to move pretty quickly where they need to, and that program continues to expand. I thought it was also helpful, based on the audience today, just to kind of mention our role right now in the refugee crisis. So we've been working extensively with the UN since last May to identify different ways that we can uniquely contribute. Where we've landed right now is that we're going to continue and expand our program around providing travel credits to relief workers in various areas, in addition to financial resources to UNHCR. And then having our community actually give those donations as well to UNHCR. We are looking at other opportunities, both locally and globally. Being a global company, we always want to make sure that we are looking at both of the issues, that we're looking at it from a global perspective, but then we're also taking it very locally so that we can work with our hosts, our guests, and our employees in the area. So how can all of you partner with us? If you're a local emergency management agency, would love to hear from you. We don't need a formal agreement with every emergency management agency, but we all know that during a disaster is not the time to exchange business cards. So we want to try to build that relationship with you prior to a disaster, but being in 34,000 cities, we also know that that's not possible. So what I would say is know that we are always available, so if something happens in your community, you can reach out and let us know that you need our support or that you'd like to explore the support. And then from a preparedness standpoint, if you are concerned or you would like to help provide preparedness training to our hosts or information, we would also love to partner with you on that end, regardless of how small your town is or how large your city is. We'd love to have that conversation with you. If you have nonprofits that either work with you or if there are nonprofits in the room, we also have the ability to create business accounts, which basically allow you to have those accounts pre-built before disaster, so that when we do activate the tool, it's very easy for you or your relief workers to go in and book. The reason why we encourage the business account is so that, as many people know, as relief workers are deploying in, it's a little bit hard to book your travel. It allows somebody else to book on your behalf. So that's something that we also like to do. And then as individuals, we'd love obviously for everyone to have an Airbnb account for multiple reasons, but we would say, particularly for this, if you're ever a survivor in a disaster and you are displaced, this is also a tool that's open to you. And I will stop there for questions and answers.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm impressed how you keep the time, so it's extraordinary.
I have my little stopwatch. Which I did want to say, whoever the gentleman was about the battery, I will say, so in the Paris attacks, we were sheltering in place in a bar with my colleague Sophia here, and this battery pack was amazing, and we would not have survived without it. So I would encourage everyone to get an extra battery pack. Just a little side comment.
Okay, I'm not sure whether you can buy a better pack outside yet, but I don't know. Maybe it's a gift for the next time.
And I'm going to encourage Sophia and Stephanie to join me on stage just in case there are questions outside of the disaster realm that might come up from either a policy perspective or partnership perspective.
Okay, the question and answer session is open as I have the floor, so allow me just to start with the first question. You may sit over there, that's nice. You know, my background is fire, so I come back to one of your slides, and with this background I'm also dealing with the fire safety and accommodation facilities, so a lot of criticism has come up with the Airbnb and something, you know, and what you showed is that you motivate hosts to have smoke detectors and be aware of the procedure in case of fire or something like that. How do you do that? For example, with the London Fire Service, do they provide training or something like that? Or do you require hosts to have smoke detection in place, or what? How does that work?
Sure. So we highly encourage our hosts to get smoke detectors and be in compliance with the local law. Additionally, we have a host responsibility or responsible hosting page, which Sophia can probably speak a bit more to, but specifically for fire, with the London Fire Brigade, for example, we just provided last week offline training to many of our hosts. Additionally, provide smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors free of charge. And we have a program with Airbnb globally where we've given away almost 15,000 basically combination smoke detector, carbon monoxide detectors, with about 10,000 remaining free, which just requires the host to send in a note to get that, and that will be shipped to them. And then following that, our hosts can actually purchase those detectors online, and that just comes out of their earnings. We don't profit off it at all. It's just an offering to make sure that they have a resource. And so, like I said, we really try to direct our hosts to the local laws and resources and encourage them through preparedness messaging, training, both online and offline.
And the online training is available for everybody, or only for members of your community? Because the reason why I'm asking that, so one of the findings we see is that training of staff in hotels and something, it's really lacking. So we have to improve that, and if you do something online, would be very helpful for the entire community of not only Airbnb but also the others.
So we only provide for our hosts right now, but we partner with the organizations or local emergency management agencies that will that actually either provide the training free of charge or they're able to send that message out to others.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm sure there will be questions, but maybe you introduce yourself first.
Oh. Hi, it's me. I'm Sofia Gyusu. I'm the Public Policy Manager for a large part of EMEA, covers Scandinavia, Central Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, Middle East and Africa.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Hodges. I do strategic partnerships with tourism bureaus and nonprofits and governments across EMEA.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the audience? Are there any? I think they are also impressed also to see such nice ladies on the stage, so concentrate on questions, please. Gary.
Hi, Kelly and Kyle. I'm Gary from the European Emergency Number Association. I wonder if Sylvain or Alexandre are still in the room. Sylvain or Alexandre? I think they left. I was wondering, I think we sent you an email, Kelly, about that. For instance, during the Brussels attacks, we didn't see what Airbnb was doing on Twitter, although we heard about that thanks to you. And we were involved in the setting up of the open house hashtag in Brussels. And we were wondering if we could find a way to cooperate in a way, because what you do is very similar to what has been done by Sylvain and Alexandre, for instance.
The answer is absolutely yes. We'd love to work with you and figure out ways to kind of collaborate both on the communication side of it, but also on the technical side of it. Sure.
May I ask another question concerning the reaction of relief organizations after you have activated the tools? You mentioned several examples. Has there been any reaction? Okay, it was helpful or something like, or you could do better or something. How do you maintain the contact with these organizations?
So with the relief organizations, right now, specifically, we work a lot with International Rescue Committee, MSF, and Mercy Corps. And those three are consistent partners with us, both on the $0 activation, but also on travel credits. And so, as I mentioned before, the product or the tool was under construction for the last, I would say, 6 months up until January. And so that travel credit program allowed us to build a lot of these relationships with NGOs. And so I'm probably in touch with most of them, at least weekly, if not sometimes daily, depending on what's going on. And so we work quite frequently, and actually just recently in London, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the START network, but they have a network of the larger NGOs that deploy globally to responses of about 27 member organizations, and they'll be at 44. So we're constantly getting out in that community, working with associations of NGOs, getting them on the platform or educating them on what we have and what's available.
Okay, but
Just to add to that, it's important to say that, of course, we are a global company, we're a global platform, we have an office in San Francisco, but we are also hyper-local, not just because some members of staff work in Europe and in other places around the world, but because our community of hosts who share their house, their room, their home on the platform are in location themselves. So in the same way that you would have someone tweeting from the Bataclan or from Beside or from Paris, or the same with Brussels, the people we have on the ground are invaluable, not just in terms of resources, but in terms of us understanding what the situation and the needs are. And by combining that with the global work that Kelly does with official organizations, we also get the advantage of knowing what is happening on a national level, on a regional level, and on a neighborhood level as well.
okay, one last question. And may I ask the last question? How do your customers know that you provide such a tool or such an help in case of an emergency? Do you advertise that, or is it?
So we haven't been advertising or self-promoting it. We only do it when we actually activate. So while we're continuing to evolve or pilot certain parts of this product, I would say it's fairly new as far as the new enhancements that we've added. We haven't done a full launch out to our guests and hosts. Many of them have found it either literally through the news or when we send a message out to hosts and guests when we activate.
Thank you. I think we stop this nice presentation, and I want to make you aware that we have now a coffee break, and there's also the virtual control room instant presentation during in the innovation theater in the middle of the exhibition area, and I want to close this session giving a hand to